Hi, and welcome to the festival. It is so great to have an opportunity to talk to birders and about birds, even virtually. I'll take what I can get right now. So it's great to see you here. Thank you for watching this video. I am coming to you from my home in West Virginia, as you can see in my corner here. Try not to rock in my rocking chair too much while I'm talking, but thought I would stay comfy for this. And I'm going to jump right into it and to give you just a little bit of background information on me. I have enjoyed birds my entire life. For the past 8 years or so, I've been birding a lot, as far as taking birding trips and really paying attention to my life list and whatnot. I've actually worked with birders for about 8 years as well. Um, I started my company, Nighthawk Agency, in 2017, and I work with birding companies. So that's festivals and tour companies, nonprofits, for profits, birding clubs, you name it. So that's been a lot of the experiences that, or that's given me a lot of the experiences that I'm going to talk about today. I'll tell you, a little bit more about me, and you'll hear more about me throughout this talk. And with that being said, I am going to jump right into what I'm talking about today, and that is lessons that I have learned as a non male birder. Now, I'm going to start with just a couple of disclosures and kind of prep you for the direction that we're heading in this talk. First off, this is something that I am drawing from my personal experiences and conversations that I've had with other birders about their experiences. I am making generalizations based on these things, and that's how I decided to base this conversation. And again, I'm going to be getting into more of that as I go, but that kind of gives you an idea of where I'm coming from for this. And I also want to touch on why I am giving this talk, and talk about the reasons that I think each of these lessons are important. And they came down to three different points. First off, I want this to be a way to open these conversations and to have others talk about this. So this is a talk that I am giving, by myself to a computer screen, and that's working with what we have. But I encourage you to use the chat, share your comments, and take this conversation outside of this video as well, and use it as a starting point for you and for other birders. I also am highlighting some of the differences that I have had in my experiences that I would not have had if I were a male birder. And that's a lot of the focus for this. And lastly, this is one that I'll touch on more too, is to create camaraderie in birding. And I think that there are a lot of shared experiences that a lot of us have that if we open this conversation and have it, we'll feel more united. And when we have that, we can make more of a difference together as well. So each of the lessons, like I said, that I have learned, I feel like connect to at least one of these things. And that's kind of how I've guided this. Okay, I have a cup of tea and I'm ready. So let's chat. Going to jump right into a lesson that I had to learn and accept, and that's taken me a few years to do. And that is that you will feel alone sometimes when you're birding. Now, in some cases, that is because I am the only female in a group of birders. And of course, that does happen. But that's not in itself when I feel or have felt alone when I'm birding. Instead, it's when I feel like I'm birding in a different way than the people around me are, and that they may not accept my style of birding as much. When I first started to go on birding trips and then started guiding and those types of things, I was scared to call myself a birder because I felt like I didn't meet the whatever expectations I felt like others had that justified who was a birder. And because of that, it seemed like not everyone could be called a birder. And I've heard people say, well, I'm not a birder, I'm a bird watcher. And it's just too bad that people feel intimidated to be able to call themselves what they feel like they are. Or in other cases, to some people I would say, "Oh yeah, I'm a birder," and to others I wouldn't because of the birds on their life list or the company that they guide for, and I just felt like there was a comparison that had to be made there, which doesn't. Now, I have been so passionate about birds my entire life. I have photos that my mom has given me that I don't even remember of me feeding chickadees when I was little and doing presentations in school about birds. I didn't know every bird in North America by any means. I wasn't even using binoculars. And it's taken me a long time to be able to call myself a lifelong birder and feel like that was okay because I felt like you had to check off the list of things that birders do to call yourself a birder. And that's when I felt alone. When I step back and think about other people and the conversations I've had with them, I realize that others struggle with that too. That you call yourself a bird watcher instead of a birder, or you just say, I like to look at birds. But of course, you don't have to call yourself a birder if you don't want to. But the exclusivity of the term can isolate people. And there have been times when I know that people have looked at me and thought that I didn't fit the typical mold of a birder and made a judgment on that. And you see it sometimes and experience it in the field. And that is what can make you feel alone. On the flip side, birding is growing so quickly, and the ways that people enjoy birding is diversifying so much that it truly makes each of us a trailblazer in our own unique ways. And even if you do feel alone as a birder sometimes, it's important to know that there is a community out there for you. And there are tons of different communities in themselves that can be the ones that make you feel most at home and most comfortable. I thought about listing communities for me that I've found, but it's just, I don't want to exclude anything from the list. So please drop them into the chat or add to the conversation with the communities that you've found. And maybe I'll do the same for me on this video. And when I look back at all of the years that I have enjoyed birding, I realized that when I really got to embrace my passion fully was when I found my community. And there are other people out there who enjoy birds but have not found that community yet. So, as birders ourselves, and you've hopefully found what you feel is some sort of community that's at least led you here to this festival. But it's important to help others do the same and think about the ways that one might feel alone in birding and provide support and community for them to fulfill their passion fully. And that leads me into the second lesson that I've learned, and it's one that really answers the why to why I'm doing this video. And that is that there is value in sharing your story. As I said in the beginning, a lot of these lessons have come from conversations that I've had with other birders, especially non male birders or minority birders. And in many cases, we're always surprised that we have similar stories to tell. And if we want others to not feel alone, we need to help them see that we either have been there or experienced the same thing, whatever the case is. And that's why it's important to have these conversations and tell our stories and talk about the lessons we've learned, not just in the small communities that even when we feel like we're in our comfort zone, but out here in the public with others so that others can find this information and feel welcome in the first place. When I was prepping for this talk, I put a chat in the World Girl Birders on Facebook and was asking about ideas for the title. And a lot of people were suggesting things like steps for inclusive birding. And the word inclusive came up a lot and how to be an inclusive birder. Do I feel that I am the most qualified person to be giving that talk? No. Do I feel that I'm the most qualified person to be having this talk? No, not necessarily. Um, I feel like I can talk about my experiences with confidence. But more so, I've just seen that this is a hole in the birding community where this conversation is not being had on, the major platforms or out in the open for everyone to hear. And I do think that there's value in sharing our stories, and that's why I'm giving it. That's why I'm here. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about, even if I'm not the best person to, be leading these conversations, and hoping that it helps others to do the same so that more of these conversations are had. Going to tell a couple more stories about some personal experiences over the next few lessons so that others know that they aren't the only ones who have experienced them. Lesson 3. I think out of everything I have in this presentation, this is the most subjective one. I think we all experience this a little bit differently. This is what I hear from non-male birders overall, more than anything else. And that is the feeling of constantly needing to prove yourself and your skills and your worth as a birder. My lesson from that is that you can overcome that feeling. I can't tell you how many times I've either been in the field as a guide and had someone question all of my IDs, or somebody comes up to a group and looks at me last as someone who's leading, or even just when I'm not guiding, when I'm just informally birding with someone who's a male. I am nearly always the second person that is talked to, or that is asked or directed a question about the birds. And a lot of assumptions have been made over the years that I either am not birding, or I'm just taking pictures, or something like that. And like I said, this is what I hear more than anything from non-male birders. It is not an uncommon occurrence, and I don't think it can be said enough that this happens on such a regular basis, because it's so easy for someone to do it and not even think twice about it. And the more we can talk about it, the more that there can be awareness, and that people will look at the birders in front of them equally. With where I am and where the birding community as a whole is right now, I go into every guiding situation expecting to prove my clients or my attendees wrong from my skills as a birder, versus proving them right. I realize that these types of feelings bother some more than others. I think that especially when I started working with birders professionally, I felt a need to take myself very seriously because I wanted to do my job well. And I think that made it harder for me to cope with this and to figure out the best way to manage it and change perspectives. I will digress just a little bit to say that from my experience, and I have been lucky to be around a lot of different birding guides all over the world from all different, types of birding entities. And I can say that the guides that are regarded as the best, overall, are the ones that show their passion the most and are as excited about every bird as the people around them are. And when I am leading any sort of group activity with birding, I just make sure that I'm not afraid to get as excited at, the common birds as the rarities, because I feel it. And when I'm not afraid to show that, I think it helps others get excited too. But like I said, I digress. I just think that's an important thing to say to anybody who's birding with others. And this is where it all ties together, in being that community feeling of support, and making sure that others don't feel alone in the fact that they're enjoying birding differently than you. Because when you have the feeling of support of a community behind you, that's when you can have the confidence in yourself and in your birding, and you overcome that feeling that there's something to prove. Now, I firmly believe that with all of that being said, you should take no BS. And if there's ever been a time when you wish you would have said something afterwards, or that you wish you would have stood up for yourself, you know what I mean by this. And I hope that next time you feel confident in holding your own. Okay, so this next lesson comes with a little story from me. I'm going to start with putting the lesson up front, and that is that as a non male birder, you have to prep more than men. That is in some ways, because, like I said in the previous lesson, you are going to have to prove people wrong more than prove people right. From my experiences, like I said in the last lesson, there will be a lot of cases where you'll be questioned more than a male birder, and you'll have to, be more over prepared to prove yourself right in a situation, and that does happen. But I want to use this lesson to also point out how much non males have to prepare in so many different ways for birding. So a few years ago, I was on a work related trip where I was staying at a nature lodge. It was in the off season, so they had short staff and that type of thing. Long story short, without many details, I was in my room at night and a man broke into my hotel room. Um, there was no damage done besides him sitting in the room for a few hours. He was drunk and he eventually left. He had broken in through the window, so he went back out through the window. Um, and like I said, there was no harm done beyond that in itself. But as I was sitting there up for hours from 2:30 to 4:30 um, in the night, there were two twin beds. I was sitting on one. He was sitting on the other. I could not go into the bathroom because the lock didn't work. I could not leave from the front because it went out to the open and there were no other staff members on site. I was aware of these things because I had noticed them earlier in the day. It was the day that my first night there, so I just checked in. But I didn't say anything. I didn't think anything of it because I didn't think any harm would be done. I never reported that man. I did not tell the hotel staff. I did not tell the people that I was working with because I was scared that I would somehow be to blame, that I would not look professional because I was working in a professional setting and I felt like I would show my age and my gender as, a weakness in that. And it's not something I've talked about much since. And it's not something that I feel comfortable talking with or talking about. But I learned so much from that. And I don't want those lessons that I learned to not be ones that I share with others because they're so important. I'm not scared to travel alone. I have done it many times since in many different countries, but that was an experience that I would not have had if I were a male. Something like that could have happened, and I'm not saying that that doesn't happen, but it does happen much more to females, and that would not have happened to me because the man said, I mean, there were plenty of comments that made it obvious that it was because I was not a male that he was in that room. And I don't tell this story to scare other non male birders by any means, but I think it's so important to say how many steps have to be taken as a non male for every choice that you make, as much so as choosing a destination for a birding trip. And that means not going certain places or not staying in certain places. And so many things that are either off limits altogether or have to be changed altogether, or just in that it's more important for a non male to carry mace or have an emergency plan in place to grab your phone quickly or those types of things. If you are a non-male birder, that is something that you have to think about anytime you're out in the field. And if you are a male birder, you need to realize that those are extra steps and precautions that non-males need to make. I want to talk a little bit about some things that came up during Black Birders Week and in the week that followed, that and this is all kind of tied together for me. And some of the conversations that came around that were from BIPOC birders saying that there were places where they just did not feel comfortable to go bird. I live in one of the least racially diverse places in the country. And from those conversations, I really started to think about what it would feel like or could feel like for someone who looks different than the vast majority of other people around here, let alone birders, but just the general public. And compare that to my own experiences when I have felt alone. And I can tell someone who comes here, you'll be with me, it'll be fine. I'm sure nobody's going to say anything to you, but that doesn't mean that the people who are here won't feel uncomfortable in that setting. And so I'm tying this all back to the first lesson really, and that it's important to recognize when others feel alone, that they might have to take other extra steps that you wouldn't think about to feel okay in a situation, and that it's something that needs to be acknowledged and talked about so that we can, as a community, move forward on these issues. Okay, I'm going to have a sip of tea. That really is a story that I've not said publicly by any means, and even though there was very little damage done, just that in itself has made me question whether or not it's something I should talk about, because is it even significant enough to talk about? And but even just as I've put this presentation together and my thoughts have gone back to that night so many times over the past few years, I realize although it was just a small incident, it is important to talk about the small things as much as the big things, in any way that we feel that we are not the majority and that other people may need help understanding where we're coming from. Okay, here we are moving on to lesson number 5. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I'll say it again at the end, but I'm saying it now. I hope that you're finding value in the words I'm saying. I hope that you are able to, provide your own take on this and your own version of this conversation and share your lessons as well with me and with other birders around you. We're ending on a high note, and the biggest lesson that I've learned as a birder, and that is that through birding, your world will never be the same. And that is in so many wonderful ways. Birding is what you make it, and that is one of the most beautiful things about the hobby, that you can find your own way in birding. And that most likely you will learn a lot about yourself, about nature, about the world, about other people along the way. I think sometimes, especially in the ways that birding is growing, people can get caught up in the listing and the birds you've seen and you haven't seen, or the photographs you want to take, or the places you want to go. And if you ever feel that you're losing your passion for birding, I hope that you're able to just step back and look at the journey that it's taken you on, and the reasons that you started it or found it in the first place, and that above all, you are loving every moment that you do it. Birding can lead to so many other good things that you do, either for the birds or for the environment, or even as I'm learning now, socially and connecting with other people and connecting, other communities around the world. It is all exactly what you want it to be, and birding can take you where you want. I hope that you walk away from this video ready to embrace birding however you would like, that you embrace others who are also finding their own journey through birding, and not shying away from pointing out the things that make that difficult for you or the obstacles that you face along the way. Sharing your stories that you come across and the lessons that you learn, and reaching out to others who might benefit from hearing them. I am going to wrap this up with one stat that is something that I would really like to spend some time working on digging a little deeper into, and that is that the majority of birders are not male. From the sources that I found for this presentation, that was as high as 56%. But I would really like to connect with some birding clubs and organizations and even groups of people who serve birders, whether selling products or leading tours or whatever it is, and really break down these percentages and look at them, because non-males usually feel like they are the minority in birding, but that's not the case. It's just not by any stat. The amount that it is not the case could vary depending on the situation, but overall, there are less males than non-males in birding. And as the birding community grows, I hope that it begins to feel that way. One more time, thank you for listening to this conversation that I'm having with my computer screen, but that I hope I can have with you in the future. Enjoy the virtual birding opportunities that we have right now, and whatever birding you can have on your own. I hope to see you out in the field very soon. Thanks for watching.